So outside of my family, I have never met a Lockhart.
Is that right?
Never met them. Anything. They exist.
They-
Never met one.
There's actually a town in Arizona called Higley, Arizona.
Is that right?
All I know is, once my dad's side, of course, they came up and settled the Marlboro, Vermont area back in the day.
Yeah, it's way back.
Higley Hill down.
Kept going north.
Yeah.
No.
Yeah.
All
right, we're gonna get started here. Good morning, everyone.
Morning.
Okay, we're live. Welcome to the Legislative Committee on Administrative Rules, April 11, 2024. Before we get started, I'd like to do introductions, so we'll work to my left with Legislative Counsel.
Jennifer Carby, Director and Chief Counsel, Office of Legislative Counsel.
Representative Seth Baumgartz, Bennington 4.
And Representative Mark Higley, I represent the Orleans Lamoille District.
Senator Dave Weeks, representing Rutland County.
Representative Carol Odie, representing Far New North End of Burlington.
Ginny Lyons, Senator representing Chittenden Southeast.
Mark McDonald, Senator representing Orange County.
Representative Trevor Squirrel, representing Underhill and Jericho, and supporting us.
Administrative Assistant Lindsay Schreier.
Okay, we got them all. All right. First on the agenda, minutes from March 28, 24. Do I have a motion? Any discussion? Those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you. Okay, first rule of today is Rule 24 EO3. It's emergency rule. Office of Professional Regulation, emergency administrative rules for notaries, public and electronic and remote notarization. And I believe Lauren Lehman is right here. You're up.
All right. Wasn't me over here. Morning, everybody.
Morning.
Lauren Lehman, General Counsel for the Office of Professional Regulation, for the record. And I'm here again about the notary rules. We, again, were just inundated. We had this past fall, we've had a huge optometry report that was due. We had significant litigation with Walgreens. And we've just onboarded 2 new attorneys this last fall. So I was the only, or last spring, so I was the only attorney for a long time. These rules, the statutory authorization finalized in July 2022. So we've had about 18 months, even though it looks like we've had it for 4 years. The final underlying law actually was finalized in July 2022. And so we've had about 18 months. 10 of those months, we were transitioning to a new Secretary of State, lost our director. We lost 2 of our 3 staff attorneys. So, we've been juggling and kind of working on a very sparse staffing and with a lot of demands going on. That said, I think the community and the state has gotten very used to being able to access remote notarial act services. So the reason for a emergency rule is typically it imperils the public's health, safety, or welfare. I think the COVID emergency has passed. The emergency here is that not continuing these rules until we get our permanent rules in place would imperil the welfare of the public who are using using notarial acts remotely, being able to perform a notarial act for somebody who can't be physically present in the same space as them. We've also added on here in a show of good faith that we're working towards this, that an electronic opportunity. So we've created internally a special endorsement for folks who want to perform electronic notarial acts. We've set the standards for tamper evident technology. We're moving toward the modernization, the thing the community needs and wants to be able to facilitate these essential transactions from wills, probate, real estate transactions, et cetera. on a remote and efficient basis. We do have rules drafted. We just met with our advisors last week. No advisors showed up, but a nice gentleman showed up to provide feedback. So we're in the process of circulating, getting stakeholder feedback for those rules. And it's our hope that these rules, these emergency rules, can be approved and extended for 6 months while we get through this stakeholder viewing ICAR, LCAR process and public hearings for the rules.
When do you expect the ICAR to get the rule?
Next month. I have the drafted.
Next month?
Yeah. I have the, all of the, we need, so now we have a draft. We've had the advisors look at it. We need to circulate it internally to make sure we can operationalize it. We have to look at our enforcement to make sure they can enforce it. Then we'll do, the Secretary of State level, Deputy Secretary of State. Then we like to reach out to stakeholders before we file with ICAR to get their feedback, to make sure that once we file with ICAR and have public hearings, we don't have to undergo major changes. So I'm hoping within the next 10 days to be able to send it to those stakeholders and give them at least 10 days to respond, provide comment, feedback before we file with ICAR.
Your emergency rule expires on July 2nd. It doesn't sound like you got enough time.
I think September,
Oh, it's 120, it should be 180 days, so it's 2 months beyond that. That's right.
it's September. Yeah, we should
Okay.
have September.
That's what it's written on here, but yeah, it's 2 months beyond that.
Sorry, I didn't.
But that's still tight.
It's tight.
And we had this conversation last time.
Did.
I wasn't happy with the fact that you're coming back for another emergency rule after multiple emergency rules. And I appreciate all the concerns and issues that have gone on, but I would also say that other departments and agencies have challenges and seem to get their rules done on time in a reasonable time frame. So I appreciate the explanation, but I want on the record to say that I'm not happy about this.
Understand.
Okay? And the ICAR chair also doesn't believe that this fits the standard. I'm not suggesting this committee disapprove this, because I understand the need to have this in place. I'm done. Thank you. Other committee members?
So we would expect to see the rule here.
You get it filed with ICAR in May, then we, I think, have 45 days. We can't hold any public hearings till at least 30 days out after publication. So then, if I'm getting the process right, so then we'd hold 2 public hearings, probably a week apart. We'd hopefully have it filed here in ICAR by July, and then we'd see it here in September, before September.
Emergency rule would run out.
It's tight.
So we'd have one meeting basically to.
We hope that it'll come here without objection, with all stakeholders on board is always our effort.
Well, with that, Mr. Chair, would you like a motion to approve 24 EO3 emergency rule, the Office of Professional Regulation, Administrative Rule of Notaries Public and Electronic Remote Notarization?
Okay, we have a motion for Representative Higley to approve the rule. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Those opposed? Thank you very much. Appreciate it. Next up is Rule 23 P40, Vermont Criminal Justice Council rules. And Kim McManus, the General Counsel for Vermont Criminal Justice Council. That must be you?
That is me. Good morning.
Okay, you have the floor.
Thank you so much. Good morning, Chair and committee members. For the record, my name is Kim McManus. I'm the Associate General Counsel for the Vermont Criminal Justice Council, and it is a pleasure to appear before you today. Pursuant to Title 20, Section 2355, the Vermont Criminal Justice Council is required to create and maintain rules for governing the training and certification of all law enforcement officers in the state of Vermont. You have not met me or anyone from the council since, I believe, 2017. our current rules outlining our council's organization and membership processes, rules, and regulations was created in 2017 and went into effect in 2018. As you are all likely aware, our governing statute for the council, Title 20, Chapter 151, has undergone significant changes in 2018, 2020, and 2023. Notably, our name changed slightly, but more importantly, our council size and membership of our council significantly changed from a council of 12 predominantly law enforcement agencies to a council of 24, which included not only law enforcement, but other non-law enforcement state agencies, such as the Department of Mental Health, Human Rights Commission, Network Against Domestic Violence, and others, and also importantly, including 7 governor-appointed citizens from a variety of backgrounds. We also had significant changes statutorily to our professional regulation, our ability to greatly expand what the council could regulate for our law enforcement officers. When the council was reconfigured in 2020, the council created a rules subcommittee who was tasked with revising our rules and regulations, and their efforts focused on 3 things. 1, reorganizing our rules for easier navigation, aligning our rules with the statutory changes that had taken place over the years, and designing our training rules to provide the council with some flexibility as we move forward with a 3-year curriculum review for our basic training courses, which is currently in its first year at the Academy. The proposed rules before you is the result of 18 months of work by the Council's Rules Subcommittee. I will just point out a few significant changes. Largely, there was a lot of rearranging, and we used much of the language from our current state of rules, but I'd like to point out a few significant changes. In the first 2 chapters, organization and rules of general applicability, they're quite similar, massively reorganized with a little bit of editing, but the 2 notable changes in this section is Rule 4, that our quorum for council hearings has been adjusted to 9. And that is because even though we're a council of 24, when we have council hearings, 5 of our members of the council who sit on our professional regulation subcommittee are not allowed to sit in council hearings. They're not allowed to rule on those hearings because they were essentially part of the group that decided to move the case forward. So sort of separating the council members who are part of the prosecution process, so to speak, with the council members who then hear the adjudicatory part of a officer's professional regulation hearing. The other change in Rule 5 is that we've added a vice chair so that we have 2 vice chairs instead of 1. The bulk of substantive changes before you is in Chapter 3, the training section. Our proposed rules simplify the language regarding our executive director's power to certify criminal justice counsel instructors and added criteria for an officer to become an instructor, and made that more clear to officers what they needed to do to apply and be certified as an instructor for any counsel coursework. We also edited the language for our minimum training requirements to reflect that we're moving towards a competency evidence-based curriculum, not a curriculum tied to hourly training. And that the list of core classes within basic training should not be in rule, but should be approved annually by the council to ensure that we stay up to date on the most current and best practices for training law enforcement officers. Lastly, there is additional language in Chapter 4, professional regulation, to reflect the current practices of our professional regulation subcommittee. The proposed rules before you were discussed significantly with the council. The subcommittee presented several drafts to the council over that 18-month time period, and the council approved the proposed version before you on August 2nd, 2023. The council, I will just note for you, the members that the council represents who are directly impacted by the rule revisions, and that would be the Department of Public Safety, Department of Motor Vehicles, Department of Fish and Wildlife, the Attorney General's Office, Department of State's Attorneys and Sheriffs, the Troopers Association, the Police Association, the Chiefs Association, the Sheriff's Association, and the Vermont State Employees. And they all approved this revision. We also held 3 public meetings regarding the rule revisions and repeatedly requested that law enforcement agency heads and members of any of the council subcommittees communicate their feedback during those meetings or directly to me. Lastly, a big thank you to Legislative Counsel Tim Devlin, who reviewed our proposal and noted a few ambiguities in his review. I submitted a letter to your committee requesting a few modifications that do not alter the spirit of the proposed filing, but offer clarifying language to make the rule's intent as clear as possible. This is my first time in front of this committee, but it will not be the last. We are very aware that we have a number of areas to create additional rules in, and we're hoping that this proposed file is approved by your committee so that we can use it as our new backbone as we move forward. I'm very happy to answer any questions. I realize this is not your traditional proposal and that it's quite a large revision. So happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Thank you, Kim. The letter that she's referencing is the April 10 letter, but I think was emailed yesterday. Was it, Charlene? Yeah. And so if you've had a chance to look at that. You referenced the fact that you're going to be making a number of other, going through some other rulemaking. I assume that in the next set of rulemakings that you take on, that you will in fact get us a correct annotated version for each of those rules. Makes it very difficult for us to read it when it doesn't come across that way. Thank you.
Yes, and I do apologize. As the subcommittee had worked through their revision, there was no longer, by the time I came in last year, there was no longer a strike through version from the old, or not, hopefully soon to be old rules, but our current rules to our new proposal. But yes, moving forward, this will be much more streamlined because we will be working from this document and be able to show you within the document any changes or additions that we are requesting.
Committee members, any questions? Tim, do you have anything to add? May I have a motion? Senator Bray.
I would move that we.
Yeah, that's fine.
140P40.
40, correct?
Yes.
All right. I want to make sure that I've moved to the right one. I would move approval of Rule 23P40, Vermont Criminal Justice Council rules,
As modified.
as modified by the letter just cited by the chair.
We have a motion. Any additional questions or comments? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you so much. I appreciate your time.
It's not always this easy.
Well, and I would just like to take a second to publicly thank Charlene, who was incredibly helpful. This is my first time going through the rulemaking process, and everyone could not have been nicer as I stumbled my way through. So thank you.
Okay, thanks. Okay, next up, we have Rule 24P05, Department of Vermont Health Access, Private Non-Medical Institution Rules Simplification. And James Block is legal counsel of the Department of Vermont Health Access. You're up.
Good morning. Thank you for your time this morning, members of the committee. My name is James LaRock, and I'm a staff attorney with the Department of Vermont Health Access. Before I turn to the substance of these rules, This is not my first rulemaking package, and yet I will also thank Charlene Dindo for her careful time and attention helping me stumble my way through this rulemaking. So I appreciate the committee staff's time. I also want to thank Jen Carby for her time and attention. Jen asked us to resubmit a new annotated rule package for both this rule as well as the nursing home simplification rule. And Jen also caught several typos that were holdovers from prior versions of these rules because they've been around for a long time. I think the new annotated rules are clearer, but my apologies for having to send you yet another rule package a week before this hearing. And I want to underline all changes that have been made since the publicly noticed rule filing are just clarifications and typo fixes. They're not substantive. Most of my comments are going to address both of these sets of rules because they're doing the same thing. So if the members of the committee have any questions about this rule package or the nursing home rule package, please feel free to stop me and ask those questions at any time. As the members of the committee probably already know from experience, Vermont Medicaid has been working for the past several years to incorporate all of its disparate rules into a unified and streamlined code of administrative rules, the healthcare administrative rules. These rules are moving the PNMI, private non-medical institution, reimbursement methodology, as well as the nursing home reimbursement methodology into HCAR. The major substantive change to both rules packages is transitioning the details of that rate setting methodology into a new reimbursement manual. We've provided a draft of what the reimbursement manual would probably look like in both rule packages at the end as an exhibit. And although it's not strike and underscore annotated, you can see that almost all the material from those rules is getting moved unchanged into the reimbursement manual with a couple substantive distinctions. This is intended to align how we set rates for PNMIs and nursing homes with how we set rates for all other providers. We set rates for all providers basically as a matter of policy under the Global Commitment to Health waiver that we've negotiated with the CMS. If we make changes to the methodology under the Global Commitment to Health system, we have our own public notice process that's required by federal law for providers and affected anyone in the public to submit a comment on changes to the methodology. That includes changes to methodology for providers with large budgets where policy adjustments can have large impacts. Nursing homes and PNMIs aren't intended to be any different under this new change to a reimbursement manual. There are a couple substantive changes that we have to make at the same time. Things are moving quickly in both the nursing home and PNMI world, and there's a lot of plates that we have to keep in the air. On the nursing home side, CMS, the federal government agency that oversees Medicare and Medicaid, has ended support for the current system that Vermont Medicaid uses to measure the acuity of nursing home residents. So we need to transition to a new system. The current system is in rule. That rule requires that we use what's called the Resource Utilization Group 4 or RUG 4 resident acuity system. Because it's in rule, we have to change the rule. No getting around it. Our proposed changes to that portion of the rule just say basically whatever resident acuity system that we pick, with the understanding that we're going to be picking the resident acuity system that the federal government tells us to pick, just to avoid duplication of effort there. As well, for both nursing homes and PNMIs, we're making targeted changes to the reimbursement methodology to try to push a little bit more funding to both sets of providers so that they can hopefully avoid being in dire financial straits and seeking emergency relief from the state. That's all happening. We're seeking funding for that in the committees of jurisdiction. That's all tangential to this rule change. That's all in the big bill. That's not necessarily relevant to this rule change, with the exception of the change to resident acuity for residents of nursing homes. Really, the goal with these changes is just to streamline the process of making changes to the reimbursement methodology. Currently, if we're making any changes minor as just tweaking a cap to either the nursing home or the PNMI reimbursement methodology, we have to go through this rule adoption process, and it can take up to a year. We have to get fiscal support for the change. If we know that a change is urgently needed, that can put us in a real bind where we have to start the rulemaking process before we necessarily know if we have fiscal support for the change. Members of the committee might recall last year or 2 years ago, we got inflation added to the PNMI reimbursement methodology. So that's the rule package that's currently in front of the committee. And everyone knew we needed inflation. It wasn't part of the reimbursement methodology before, and in a period of high inflation, it was a real burden on these providers for Vermont kids. But we had to start the rulemaking process before we had even gotten it approved in the governor's recommended budget. And it was awkward. We had to go in front of the committee, the Legislative Committee of Administrative Rules, and say, well, we have this rule change. It's to get inflation. You can't really make any changes to it because we've already got the money. And I kind of put the cart before the horse. By moving the reimbursement methodology into a reimbursement manual, what we'll be able to do is just go to the committee of jurisdiction, ask for the money. If we get the money, great. If we don't get the money, we don't get the money and we don't make the change. But we don't have to have a concurrent rulemaking process that doesn't really look like a rulemaking process while we're also trying to get the policy discussion happening in the committee of jurisdiction.
Can I stop you there just for a second?
Absolutely.
We're moving something out of the rulemaking process.
Right, we're looking at guidelines
Okay. You're comfortable with this?
so far.
Okay. And you're okay. No, you're not okay
Well,
either.
it's not.
All right,
it's not-
continue. I just
it's
wanted,
not
I wanted to sort of
written down in the
Okay,
green books.
continue.
And I'm happy to answer any questions, particularly in the nursing home rules as well. And I'm coming to the tail end of my prepared remarks on this. I just wanted to mention that on the nursing home side, we've been working with our Vermont nursing homes on this proposal, and the Vermont Healthcare Association submitted a comment in support of the rule. The comment says a lot of other things as well that are about sort of reimbursement for nursing homes in general that I think are outside the scope of this rulemaking. We've also been working with our Vermont PNMI providers on the PNMI rule change, the Vermont Coalition of Residential Providers, or VCOR, and have heard no objections from them on this either. We noted to the VHCA, at least, that this change is basically value neutral, that it would make it easier for the legislature to just cut the choices per care budget and make the division of rate setting figure out how that's going to work. They certainly could do that if that's the direction the legislature wants to go in the future. Despite that, we still have the support of the VHCA because I think because they would appreciate the flexibility in a time where a lot of things are changing in the nursing home space. I understand the committee might have questions about this rule, or other legislators might have questions about the proposed rule. I'm happy to answer any questions as I'm able to do.
Thank you. I do want to come back to that point.
Yes.
And I look to our chair of committee of jurisdiction and also Ledge Council, because I believe.
Right. Let me, can I ask, let me ask a question. So your intent here is to follow federal rules and guidelines throughout. Both the
In general, yes.
guidelines that you're putting in place allow for you to be flexible under federal law or federal rules.
In general, yes. I think an example, the biggest example of that is the change to resident acuity measurement for nursing home residents. So we're required by state statute to have a system for modifying each nursing home's rate to account for whether they're taking particularly hard to place patients. That's in Title 33, Section 905, subsection B. Historically,
that's for nursing homes. What about
that's for nursing homes.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to cut you off. Were you going to ask me if for PNMI is the same? Going
back to PNMI.
Yeah, PNMIs are a trickier animal. They're not a nationwide model. They seem to have been a model, and this has been tricky for me since starting with the department, I will say. They seem to be a Region 1 CMS phenomenon. They seem to be mostly in the, at least they're, let me start that sentence over. CMS has rules for things they call private non-medical institutions, but this specific model of a institution where a child with conditions that needs treatment is getting wraparound care in terms of residential care, educational care, and treatment seems to be a New England phenomenon. So there's not as clear rules on what needs to be in the PNMI reimbursement methodology, or even how to, like on the quality side. That's mostly handled by DCF and DMH. So I apologize. I don't know that really answers your question. To the extent the question is that we want to follow federal law, yes. The answer is yes.
But there really isn't federal law with clarity around PNMI. And so it's left to the state to really oversee that. And you're suggesting that the oversight of the rules go, or the guidelines be left with committees of jurisdiction and the more general rules be left here in Lcar. That's that accurate?
In general,
Okay.
yes.
Thank you.
What we're hoping to leave preserved in rule is just the process for both sets of providers to apply for and receive and appeal a rate finding that they disagree with.
So that is different from what we currently have in statute. And I'm looking at Jen to clarify that.
So again, Jen
More or
Carby,
less.
Legislative Council. I think to me, where this was a closer issue than with a lot of our Medicaid provider reimbursement provisions is that there is for nursing homes specifically a chapter on nursing home rate setting that we don't have. So Medicaid regulates provider reimbursement for a number of other providers that I don't think are spelled out in the level of specificity in the rules that are currently in place for nursing homes and PNMIs. So to that extent, this is, I think, more consistent with the way DVA sets other provider rates. We just happen to have more of an insight because of these, the existing rules. My focus on the nursing home ones is really, again, just that the statute requires the director to establish by rule procedures for determining payment rates for people in nursing homes. And the new rules seem to be, the rule is whatever we put in the provider manual, which isn't specifically contrary to legislative intent, but is less
Close.
responsive than the current rules.
Jen, is that a question for me?
No, sort of my
Comment.
to the committee.
It's a difficult place that we're in because as you look through the rules, it makes a lot of sense. What you're doing makes a lot of sense. I'm looking at PNMI, makes a lot of sense. Greater flexibility, more in line, as Jen Carby has said, with what we currently do in other areas. So in that way, it's helpful.
Right. I think there is a very large provider manual,
Until-
for example, for how Medicaid pays providers in the community, pays hospital providers that isn't spelled out in the rules. So part of the difference is the change here is just going from the level of specificity that is currently in the rules to something that is more aligned with how DVA does their other provider rate setting, but feels less transparent.
And all my questions were about the payment, which have been brought up, so. Any questions?
And on the question of transparency, I just want to say there's nothing, our intention here is not to claim that power. On the nursing home side, this very session, we're seeking to reduce the minimum occupancy standard for nursing homes from 90% to 80%. I think that's in the draft reimbursement manual we submitted. And we're proposing to increase caps for the direct care component of the rate, as well as I believe the resident care component of the nursing home rate. We priced that out at being around $10 or $12 million, and we're in front of House Human Services this session, and that's in the governor's recommended budget. So that conversation is still happening in the committees of jurisdiction. And if we don't get the money to fund those changes don't happen. What we don't want is to have to start a rulemaking process before we've even started that conversation in the committees of jurisdiction if we want to spend the money on July 1 of that year. That's what we want to avoid. So we want to make sure that the House Human Services Committee has its say on whether we do something before we start to do it. That's really our goal. We want to stop putting the cart before the horse.
Right, and that everything you've said is very logical and helpful. The question that we're asking is how far away from current statute is it? And it's not really, but it could be considered that. So there we are. We're on a fine line, and a rock and a hard place. We are looking at PNMI right now on appropriations. So we're looking at the appropriation for the program. So I won't say, I can't say any more than what I've said. I think it's a fine line.
I'm looking at Our review period is May 2nd. So we have at least another meeting in here. And I'm just asking the question, whether we want to delay action on this or whether you want to move forward. And I'm looking at you because that's your committee
Yeah.
of jurisdiction. We did not get any feedback from the House Committee of Jurisdiction on this, so I don't.
The reason that I would postpone it would be just to have a consultation with Ledge Council on this and to ensure that we're not going faster than, we're not putting the cart before the horse in our case. It doesn't feel like we are, but it's very close.
So you would like a little extra time with this, a little extra time with this?
Yeah, I think
Okay.
that's a smart thing to do.
Senator Bray, you had your hand up.
Sure, and happy that there'll be a chance to learn more. I mean, I was gonna ask if this shift means that there's any cost implications inherent in the shift and from one method to another, and if there are any sort of practice implications, like how patient care would be delivered, what happens in a nursing home on a daily basis, that kind of thing.
I think regardless of the decision, and Jen can correct me if I'm wrong, it still goes through the budget and the appropriations process. It simply allows for the agency, the department, to make recommendations about funding. Either, I'd say, it would be through the guidelines, it would be without rulemaking and without, if they have a pot of money, then they can make decisions about how to distribute that. That I think it doesn't really change the appropriations process. Sort it out.
To echo that, it's not our intention, the mechanics of changing to a reimbursement manual will not have a fiscal impact. The substantive changes that we're also proposing this session will have a fiscal impact, but that fiscal impact is being addressed in the big bill.
In the big bill. It puts it all in the budget. I'd like to take some time to think about this.
Okay. Representative Wood.
I'd also like to hear from the House. I didn't hear what you said about the House.
Oh, I know the chair is aware, Chair of Human Services is aware of the bill, has been, she and Senator Lyons and I have exchanged a few emails,
Okay.
but I'm not sure where she.
Okay.
Senator Bray.
I noticed, so as you were pointing out, there is time to still take a position in a timely way. I don't know if we're meeting next week or we're meeting in 2 weeks.
Don't have anything scheduled for next week, right?
No, the next meeting is 24th.
Good.
And the last two rules, it should be May 2nd, not May.
So we have two housing rules, right, for 25, April 25th. So why don't we reschedule the discussion about these two rules for the 25th?
Okay, so with that information, I would propose, unless there's further discussion, propose postponing action on Rule P24, P05, Department of Vermont Health Access, Private Non-Medical Institution Rule Simplification to our next meeting on the 25th of.
We have a motion from Senator Bray to postpone action on this rule. More discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. Senator Bray.
Likewise, I would propose postponing action on Rule 24P06, Department of Vermont Health Access, Home Reimbursement Rule Simplification to the 25th.
Okay, we have a motion to postpone action on 24P06. Any more discussion? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Okay. James, thank you very much, and we'll see you in a couple of weeks.
Thank you. And to the extent that DIVA can be helpful to anyone on the committees of jurisdiction as part of those conversations happening over the next 2 weeks, we're happy to meet to help give any more clarity on this rule.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Okay, so we're on the 25th. We have two housing rules. And we'll have these two for more discussion. So with that, this meeting's adjourned. Oh, I'm
Wow.
sorry.
if I could, I didn't mention anything about approval of the minutes, but if possible, I would like to see a vote regarding approval of whatever we do, whether it's, I'm talking specifically about the Review Committee of Jurisdictions memo regarding 23P17 Vermont Public Waters Rules. Basically just says on the motion of Senator Brady, the committee approves sending a memo to the Committee of Jurisdiction. I would like to see, if possible, a vote there as well. I believe there
What
was
amendment said?
two that voted no.
I think we're fine with that. Darlene, can you figure out what that vote was? And then we'll make that change.
Oh, yeah.
I don't think we need to do anything other than. Go ahead and do that.
Thank you. Yeah.
In trouble.
Somebody has to. With that, this meeting